So let me start by saying thank you to the Aboriginal peoples for the custodianship of the land that we're meeting on today, that they continue and have applied to the land. And with that, clearly being conservative with your resources is important, but it's probably nowhere more important than in health. So today I want to talk to you about the future of health. Perfect. Excellent. So the future of health, we're truly at a really remarkable crossing in the road where the future looks really bright. Never before were we able to treat and even cure diseases that just a couple of years ago were seemed to be impossible to treat. And more importantly, we're now putting the knowledge and the power into everybody's hand in order to really make decisions about their own health themselves. And the reason all of this is possible because health has become digital, which means now it is a community effort. And that means that probably everyone in this room has contributed one way or another to how this is going to play out, by either writing code, by demanding open source, or by talking to policymakers to really make a shift into how we're going to address this area. So with that, I want to talk to you or tell you about 3 stories where the technology that you have built or helped build is enabling now to actually save lives. So the first one will be around correcting disease genes. The second one will be around democratizing the access to information. But before we go there, allow me to introduce CSIRO, the research organization that I work for. So CSIRO is Australia's government research agency. At CSIRO, we're really passionate about translating research into products that people use in their everyday lives. One of the most famous products, which today was referred to a couple of times, is Wi-Fi, which is now used in 5 billion devices worldwide. We also developed the vaccine to Hendra virus, which is a virus that is more deadly than Ebola. And on a lighter note, we developed the Total Wellbeing Recipe Book, which is now on the bestseller list alongside Harry Potter and the Da Vinci Code. So I think from that perspective, we have a nice balance between products that people enjoy and products that people need. Now, I'm closer on the needs side in working for the eHealth Research Center within CSIRO. So the eHealth Research Center is the largest digital health initiative in Australia and worldwide quite unique in that we cover the full value chain from basic research, where probably most of our stuff is, over large substantiation studies, and then all the way up to quantifying the benefit that we deliver to the healthcare system. With that, let me introduce you to the area that I'm really passionate about, which is genomics. So the genome is your DNA, and it holds the blueprint of every single cell in your body. With that, it really affects the way we look. And to make this really personal, we wrote this little app, which we call the Hitchhikers Thumb. So I encourage you to scan in that QR code, which will get you to a web page where you can scan in your thumb, and it will tell you a little bit about your genes. And what it will do is it will measure the bendiness of your thumb. Because if you have 2 copies of a specific bendy gene, you're a proud carrier of a hitchhiker's thumb, which means that your thumb will be more bendable than others. So in order to now find the most bendable thumb in this room, let's go to this web page, and hopefully more than 2 people have submitted by that time. Excellent. So with this, we're now seeing the top 3 bendiness in this room. So if it's more than 60% bendiness, then that is officially a hitchhiker's thumb. And theory goes that 1 in 3 people in this room have a hitchhiker's thumb. But as you can see from the histogram up there, it's not quite as simple. So our understanding of the genome and how it translates to something simple as how we look is actually not as straightforward, which means that probably it's not as straightforward for disease research as well. So with this, let's come back to a more serious point, in that the genome also holds the information about disease genes. So here I'm showing cystic fibrosis, where one misspelling in the 3 billion letters of your genome can be the difference between a healthy lung and a lung that struggles to maintain itself. We're working together with the ALS consortium, which is the largest single disease consortium in the world, looking at the molecular origin of ALS, which is the disease that you might be familiar with from the Ice Bucket Challenge and that Stephen Hawking had. So here it's 22,000 individuals, and we want to find out what is the genetic underlying cause that results in ALS. So in fact, it is known that there is one particular gene called SOD1 that causes ALS, a specific type of ALS. And it was also shown that modifying this gene, like correcting it, will hold the progression of ALS. In this case, in mice models, but clearly this is the first step towards an actual treatment. So therefore the question becomes, how can we, in humans, make changes, correct this misspelling in order to provide a treatment for this uncurable, sinister disease? And the answer to that is the first story. You might be familiar with CRISPR, which is basically a molecular machinery that can go into your cells and make a change in your living cells in a specific location in the genome in order to correct a misspelling that might be there. So in theory, we would prep this machinery, we would deliver it to a specific cell, in this case neurons, in order to correct the misspelling and provide a treatment. Now, practice, of course, is not that simple. And the reason for that is that because the genome is quite large, as I said, 3 billion letters, but not only that. So when we refer to something large, we typically say it's astronomical. But I argue that going forward, we should actually say it's genomical. Because every single cell stretched out the DNA is 2 meters long. We have 100 trillion cells on average in an adult body, which means that all the DNA stretched out together is larger than the universe. So this little machinery needs to maneuver through a space that is larger than the universe in order to correct a specific cell at a specific genomic location. So in order to support this massive task, we need to really prep it the best way we can, which is a quite computational challenging task as well. So the analogy here is that we want to find the right location in the genome that has the right properties, which will be going through a beach and finding the right grains of sand that has the right color, the right shape, and the right size. But it doesn't stop there, because we want to make sure that this machinery is going to one location and one location only, and not to something that looks similar. Therefore, we now have to go through all these candidate grains of sand that we collected and make sure that going through the rest of the beach, that every single one of those is quite unique. And as you can appreciate, that's quite a computational mammoth task. So, finding the right grain of sand that is unique on the beach is the analogy. So in order to do that, I don't have to tell you, we use serverless. So this was one of the first large-scale research applications that was published, and therefore received a lot of attention. Now, I'm not going through the actual architecture here. As you can see, we use Lambda function, we use DynamoDB. There is a little sparkle of SNS topic in order to parallelize stuff. If you want to know more about this, I encourage you to go to This Is My Architecture video, where we talk about this. So, this search engine for the genome, where researchers can type in the gene that they want to target, and it comes up with a ranked list of all the potential grains of sand, of all the potential target sites that researchers should focus their efforts on, is now running on the web. So it has an improved accuracy because we're using machine learning there as well compared to the state of the art. And also it's 300 times more effective than traditional approaches and faster. So how did we, and clearly, you know, with those kinds of numbers, we have some large-scale collaborators. So how did we achieve those kinds of numbers, this kind of speed up? Well, the first trivial answer is using serverless versus servers. That gives us an improvement in cost, right? So instead of $700 per month, we just have to pay, what is it, $30. But there are some additional benefits that we can pull out of serverless as well. So serverless is modular, which means that every single component we can interrogate and can optimize. So we're using something that we call the blue-yellow deployment, where two workloads or two architectures running side by side, receiving the same workload that we monitor. And the only difference between those architectures is the thing that we want to test, that we want to empirically test. So there's a hypothesis-driven evolvement of the architecture, where we measure and have a quantitative outcome, and the best one we evolve forward. So for example, we wanted to find out whether autoscaling in the DynamoDB database could improve the cost for us further. And clearly I wouldn't be showing you this if it wasn't the case. So which means we were able to slash down another order of magnitude. So from $700, we now just pay $2.50 per month, which is less than a cup of coffee, in order to provide this awesome service that really democratizes the access to high quality, safe analysis of the genomes. So DT-Scan, which is the search engine of the genome, is not only running on AWS, but it's also running on Alibaba, thanks to Sabith, whom we heard of earlier. It's also running on Azure, thanks to Simon, which really means that this notion of cloud, vendor login is not really real. Being able to, so the reason I'm showing you this comparison is that, yeah, the technologies are different and have their slight quirks, but ultimately the concepts are the same, which means that we can easily collaborate with researchers that are AWS exclusive versus Alibaba exclusive, for example. We do have a lot of collaborators in China. So this whole, I think it was said earlier that the community, the serverless community, is different. I think this is the reason why, because everything is modular, everything can be interchanged, everything can work together. And with this, I truly think that even across multiple clouds, things can work together. So genomics has changed already the healthcare system. Melbourne Genomics Health Alliance, which was one of the first alliances to bring genomic information into the clinical practice, has demonstrated that it can slash cost by 27%, which is quite staggering when you think of it, that the healthcare cost will be the single most unsustainable thing going forward. And that's just genomics, and that's just one area. So think about the possibilities. Which brings us to the last story. Think about the possibilities, like everyone would want to use genomics in healthcare and the sheer scale of it. Currently, there is a need for researchers, well, clinicians, to say, I've observed this particular misspelling. Have you seen in your other databases the same misspelling? Because if you have, then it's probably unlikely causing this rare disease for my patient. So therefore, sharing genomic information is a critical thing going forward. But doing that on large-scale data is not trivial. So the way that it's currently done, the gold standard, is by using databases and servers where all the information is consolidated in one ginormous database, because this is what we traditionally have been doing. But with the data sizes growing more and more, in fact, Frost and Sullivan estimated that by 2025, 50% of the world's population will have been sequenced, which means that there will be more data generated in genomics than in the traditional big data disciplines, Twitter, astronomy, and YouTube combined. So with that, it becomes quite clear that the traditional ways of doing compute are breaking down on that sheer scale. And we demonstrate that is actually the case. So for this Beacon approach, the consolidated database, just maintaining that will be $4,000 per month. Updating the data will be 33 hours, thank you very much. And that means like if there's 50% of the world's population sequenced, it will not be sequenced in one blob. It will come in as a constant data stream. And if every time it will be 33 hours, that's just not sustainable. Similarly, querying the data will be 20 seconds. Now 20 seconds in isolation sounds trivial, but clearly you don't want to just query one location, you want to query a lot of locations, and there will be a lot of clinicians wanting to do the same thing. So all of this really points towards the limits of this technology. So rethinking this, of course, serverless, right? Doing this in a serverless way is the answer, at least in our mind. So we developed the Serverless Beacon, which again uses the typical building blocks, Lego blocks of serverless. And just to hammer this home, where before updating data was 33 hours, we can bring it down to 22 seconds. Where before it was $4,000 a month, we can bring that down to $15. And where querying would be 20 seconds and going up, we can keep it constant at 1 second, irrespective of the dataset size. So Serverless Beacon will be hopefully the standard that will be adopted in the genomic community for sharing information across, the vital information that individual consortia have and clinicians on the other end of the world need. So again, we're working with international collaborators in order to achieve that. So from our perspective, I truly think that once you go serverless, you never go back. The rapid prototyping is absolutely amazing and will be the backbone of how we're doing business in the future. Catering for burstable workloads where you can build one prototype on a small scale and then instantly, without having to do much, you can scale it up to production is also amazing. All of this really comes to the point that innovation will become affordable for everyone. And innovation will be the single currency that will be the boundary between a successful company and a company that will be extinct in 2 years. So with that, it's probably not surprising that according to a market researcher, by 2025 it will be a $20 billion market worldwide, and I think that's an underestimate. So the 3 things I hope you remember from my talk is that serverless is really revolutionizing by empowering collaborations. The modularity, building on each other's work, is a single thing, I think, that sets this community apart from other communities. Serverless also democratizes the access and the compute on big data because it becomes affordable to build infrastructure for peak times and not pay anything for when there's no workload. But I think most importantly, I hope you agree with me that business and life science is not that different from each other. So therefore, we should be working more together in order to achieve the future of health. With that, thank you very much.